Every ISP has money just sitting on their shelves. You just call it inventory.
You've already paid for it, or you're on the hook for it. And until that gear is deployed, it's not just collecting dust, it's bleeding cash.
Oh, sorry. We were trying to save $3, so we didn't order radios. We're hoping that they'll be here next week.
And we're 3 weeks out before we can run a truck to your house.
Right.
In this episode, we're digging into what really happens when inventory turns from asset to liability, how long it takes for your investments to actually start paying you back, and what hidden inefficiencies are quietly eating your margins.
Because inventory is not a warehouse problem. It's a money problem. As a business operator, you walk into your warehouse and you literally picture piles of money on the shelf. It's very rare that your employees are going to think of it that way, but I think you can kind of get them there.
But the real question is, how long does it take before that equipment actually starts making you money? Welcome to another episode of Bandwidth. Gentlemen, glad to be here with you today. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, inventory management. Our first question for the morning is, should every ISP be running serialized asset tracking, or do you think that's overkill? Let's see, who gets to go first? Rick.
I think this one's pretty straightforward in my mind. If your inventory that we're talking about, whatever, pick an item, if it's serialized from the manufacturer, from the vendor, and it comes to you that way, and you're not continuing that into your tracking system, you're going to regret that pretty quickly, I would say. That to me is kind of your North Star. And I would continue that into, if it's not serialized, probably doesn't need to be like unique per item. Like if that was your rule, like where do you draw the line? Is it mounts, like bolts? Like you do need to track the quantity. You have to know when you have to reorder, but like this bolt versus that bolt, there's no utility to that. So that would be my North Star. What do you think, Larry?
Do you think anybody has ever serialized bolts?
I've met some pretty eccentric people.
Really? All right.
Oh, come on now.
So I definitely think you have to be serialized asset tracking at the level that Rick said, of course. But some things that are expensive enough don't come serialized. And so we did asset track them and put in our own tags because if you are going to depreciate them versus just expensing them, you're going to want the asset tracking. So there are certain cases, but for the most part, I mean, if it's got a serial number on it, or there are some vendors who don't put serial numbers on their radios and just use the MAC address. Right? That's their serial number per se.
And in my mind, those are the same thing in this
right,
context,
so it's good enough. But if you're going to do warranty and RMA type processing, you need to be tracking all that. How can you tell them, this came in on this PO?
Well,
at this
even
date,
insurance claims.
Right.
If you don't have a way to say this was my inventory, this is where it was deployed, or this was what was on my shelf when that tornado hit, then you've got a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
You definitely have to be doing that. It's not negotiable.
And I've seen ISPs start with an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet, and they track their inventory that way.
But you're still tracking. I mean, what about the guy who doesn't? He's just bringing in stuff, throwing it up, and it's like, well, where is that? Yeah, that could be anywhere.
That's right. Once it's out of the warehouse,
right?
You don't know.
Yeah.
But some operators start in their garages, right? Their first round of equipment may show up on a pallet that gets put into the family garage, and then they build their businesses that way. But being able to keep track of what they've got and where it came from and how much they paid for it is essential to their business operations.
That's why I love topics like this, because when I think of, that grassroots, I'm going to solve a problem, I'm going to fill the gap in my market, I'm going to start an ISP. You're not sitting there fantasizing about asset tracking, and one day you wake up with your garage, you're surrounded by more cardboard than you can get rid of because you just have so many things going in and out, and you don't know where things are, and did I deploy that, did I not, is it lost, is it in a truck somewhere, and
did it fall off of a truck somewhere?
yeah, literally, it's possible. I have a story about that, but I'll save that for another time.
Save that for later in the episode.
Doors open, and so a lot of stuff fell off my truck that day. And thank God the bolts weren't serialized, because I was picking them up for days.
And make sure, and then put them back in order. So you use them from the lowest serial number to the highest.
FIFO bolts.
Right, FIFO bolt.
Well, so once you start getting the inventory flowing, is just-in-time inventory a luxury or a liability in this market? When do you reorder? How do you what about your RMAs? How much money is that costing you? Do you use that to negotiate prices for your customers? I know I'm throwing a lot of questions for you, but the basic question is just-in-time inventory a luxury or a liability? Larry, you get to grab this one
I saw
first.
Rick looking at me. I'm like,
Luxury
they're going to
or
let me go
liability?
first.
Larry.
I wasn't going to take it.
Just in time doesn't work in our industry, I don't think, because we don't have a stable enough supply chain for a lot of that you can do the just in time inventory management. It's a great model when it can work, but it doesn't work for the ISP industry. So we didn't try to do just in time inventory management. You have to be able to take those, oops, that boat isn't going to be here with 100,000 radios for 3 more months, and everybody's counting on those 100,000 radios, and they're already all spoken for. So when that boat even does show up,
it's not going to do
if
you any good.
You aren't getting your chunk of them. You're not getting them for till that next boat, which maybe hasn't even left yet, if that's where they're coming from. So I don't think, for us, just in time was not anything that we looked at.
And just like we're seeing mergers and acquisitions in the ISP world, we're also seeing it in the hardware providers as well. So there's disruptions in delivery because of those changes in company dynamics. Rick, what do you think about just-in-time inventory?
You'd asked, is it a luxury or is it a liability? I think it's both. If there is something or some things that you are purchasing regularly for your business that both your need for them is so stable and predictable, and the supply chain that's bringing them to you is also so stable and predictable, what an incredible thing to unlock. And
What
there's
a
a reason
wonderful
why.
world it would be.
And I think it's possible for like non-critical things that you could get into it. Also, there's a lot of companies out there like, value-added resellers that are really big into the warehousing, and they try to give, kind of, I wouldn't say it's traditional, true, like leaned down JIT, but it's close. And it is nice to not have to have like pallets and pallets and pallets and pallets of radios. But I mean, over COVID, we saw the stability of all the supply chains.
We saw
just
flat
come
hoarding
down.
during the pandemic. We saw some people that had equipment. They were like, okay, when the doors open again, we're ready. We're really, really ready. And then they had to get that off their shelves as quickly as possible because actually new gear was coming out.
It's
right?
a double-edged sword with hardware, for sure.
Absolutely.
But I think on the other side, if you're attempting just in time and you have a critical infrastructure upgrade project or a critical deployment, and then your stuff doesn't show up on time, any efficiencies that you picked up or theoretical efficiencies that you picked up with this just-in-time approach go out the window, and you're really cursing your decision there. So I think bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right?
Inventory management, I said at the top of the show that this is one of my favorite topics to talk about, but it's because to me, it's about the money for the company. It's about the cash flow for your company. How much money do you have tied up in your inventory sitting on your shelves or sitting in your trucks?
Okay, but if you don't have it tied up on your shelves, then you can't get it. You can't do installs. You don't get the MRR. It's a big, that adds up so quickly that the money you save by trying to not have some stuff on the shelves, all lost. So we always had enough sitting on our shelves, maybe more than enough, because that's big loss. If you can't do an install, not only that, but now you start that customer off on a bad, oh, sorry. We were trying to save $3, last month. So we didn't order radios. We're hoping that they'll be here next week.
And we're 3 weeks out before we can run a truck to your house.
Right. So, and 3 weeks out, that's one billing cycle. It just doesn't work. You need to be able to keep the right stock levels. I'm not saying, you should have 700 radios if you're doing 5 installs a week. That's ridiculous. But
well, this actually leads right into my next question is, how does inventory mismanagement show up in your customer experience? And do most ISPs even realize how inventory mismanagement affects customer experience? Rick, thoughts?
Maybe my favorite, this perhaps isn't the most obvious answer, but kind of my favorite example of this is, and maybe you had one, we definitely had one or two over the years. Sometimes you have a technician that's notorious for not having their vehicle stocked correctly. And that's inventory management. We've been talking about procurement up until this point, but inventory management is a whole cycle, and part of that is having your stock levels not only in your warehouse but on your vans, and training your staff on how to do that. If you have a field technician that does not abide by these things, does not prioritize this,
It's the end of the day. He only has one radio on his truck, and that radio really doesn't work right.
Right. They had some surprise things. You didn't have your extras. How that translates to the customer is that they have to sneakily run back to the warehouse to grab what they need, and that delays the install. Or even worse, arguably, maybe they text their buddy that happens to have an extra one, and then they are delaying their install because they're being a good Samaritan and running over
a good
the
buddy.
radio. Yeah, exactly. And in terms of how you can kind of combat that, because that's hard, I also think it's kind of sort of characteristic to that technician archetype that they're probably not going to bring this to your attention, that this is something they're doing chronically. I think there's two things you can do to kind of alert yourself to this. One is more proactive, one's more reactive. If you are tracking your vehicles, like with telemetry, GPS tracking, you can usually with these platforms set up geofences and time-based alerting. So set up a geofence tightly around your restock areas, your warehouses, etc., and set it up for that odd time of the day that really nobody should be back, and you can get a little ping, and it's like, oh, Dave's back. What's Dave doing?
Stalker.
And if you're not tracking your vehicles, which frankly, I think you really should, if you're at this point in your business where you're, kind of scrutinizing over these topics, then that's a really big asset, and you should probably be tracking it. And it's a different sort of tracking. One thing you can do, and this is the reactive, is you should be able to do reporting on your inventory scanouts. So again, I'd look for those oddball time periods in the day where no one should really be scanning out inventory. And if there's, you kind of sort by user and you see Dave, well, then you know that you have something to talk about. So maybe that's not the most obvious answer to that question, but I think that would be a noticeable impact to your customer base.
Larry, what do you think about the customer experience in inventory?
On the customer experience, so I went back to the asset tracking question. If you're not tracking those assets, so now all of a sudden, they call in for a support call, and you're thinking you're having problems with their radio, but you don't know what radio they have. So you really want to get your customer now to
stab in the dark.
Go to the radio, flip this over, read this micro print that's 3-point font.
Gets smaller and smaller for me every year.
Yeah, right. So that was one way I looked at it, and then you've got the truck in for maybe it's not even going back to the warehouse to grab something. You run out of time that day, and now you need to do a second truck roll to that customer's house because you didn't have the inventory and it's end of day and you can't get back there in time because you're too far away. Now that customer has to take a second day off of work if they're not working at home. And you start off with a horrible customer experience from day one.
Yeah,
so
quite the first impression.
Management
and those are
is
hard
really
dollar
important for
costs to your
customers.
company. To have to send a truck out a second time because your technician didn't manage their inventory levels appropriately is tough. An exception is one thing, but if it's a common occurrence with a particular technician, you've got a problem, and it's going to impact your bottom line. And I do think inventory is about your bottom line. It's about the money and chasing the money. And do you have a technician that inventory disappears off of their truck? Rick, I think you've got a story about not about inventory disappearing, but just about inventory perhaps leaving a vehicle.
Oh, from before?
Yeah, I'm giving you an opportunity to tell your tale.
Yeah, I mean, I basically just had left the doors open and took off, like the barn doors in the back.
How long had you driven before you realized that your gear was being left behind? I mean, this is like a cartoon, man.
Too long. Actually, you know what? I think it was when we had pickup trucks, and that's why it was less obvious. Just the tailgate was down, and you have to literally go and pick it up.
Oh my gosh, Rick! And
I thought you were going to tell a different story. How many of you didn't tie down ladders? Have you ever had anybody do that? On the top of their van?
I don't think so. And the reason for that is my wife, when I started this job, she told me a story. I think it was one of her friends' mom was killed or something with a ladder coming off on the highway. And that scared me straight. And every technician that I hired, I would tell that story to. And I think I want to attribute it to that, to the fact that, no, thankfully that never happened to us.
That happened to us once. I was out with the installer when it happened. We're driving down the highway, and because that's where you get the speeds, and all of a sudden I see the 32-foot ladder go slide off the back of the truck. Mm-hmm. And fortunately for us, there was nobody behind us. But you're right.
Well, but even ladders are inventory, right?
They are.
Ladders and the tools that your technicians are using, and when they come to work for you and you hand them $4,000 worth of equipment, how do you know exactly what you handed them? And then what happens when they start leaving their equipment behind and they go back to the house to recoup the ladder and the ladder's gone? The ladder's been put away by the homeowner, and you can't ask them to open their barn up and give you your ladder back. That's a loss.
If there's one thing that I had to humble myself and figure out a way to solve this problem, because it was my problem, but I was notorious as a new field technician for leaving little calling cards. I think I had left everything other than the van at people's houses without knowing. Laptop, drill, cable crimpers, everything. And to solve that problem, literally what I did is I made a paper list that I taped to the sun visor.
Template, perhaps?
Yes, exactly. And I had to go through and check all my common things. And eventually I had found a way to do that. And I wasn't doing it on purpose, but it's the way my brain is wired, I suppose. I was just kind of leaving everything everywhere. But sometimes you would go back and the customer had gone back to work and my laptop's in their house. And it's like, wow, what the hell do I do now?
What now?
Yeah.
But all those things are inventory, and all those things matter to your bottom line for the company.
Absolutely.
And the truckle of you having to go back to go pick up that equipment too.
I think something as simple as like when you hire a field technician, like just apprising them to the fact of like what the replacement value of a full kit is, so they understand from the ladder to the drill to the vehicle itself. This is what we are extending to you. Sometimes people don't see it that way. I think as a business operator, you walk into your warehouse and you literally picture piles of money on the shelf. It's very rare that your employees are going to think of it that way, but I think you can kind of get them there if you let them in on that. I think that's another cultural thing where a lot of the time your money gets hidden from employees, and I think that's one of the downsides. Let them know, let them see the bills, let them understand what these literal dollar and cent costs are to the business.
Yeah, we actually did that. We had a list, and I mean, because it provided two opportunities. One, it allowed us to show them all the tools and things that they were getting and what the costs were, because they were responsible for them once we gave them to them. If you decide to, gift this to a customer, well, we should get a new one, and here's about what it's going to cost you. But it also gave us the opportunity to go through, these are what all these tools are and why you should be using them and where you should be using them. So, I mean, don't have them trying to drill through, cement with your steel bits,
Yeah, please
use the proper tools.
Yes.
Sonar helps you catch the small issues before they become outages. Stay proactive, stay smart, and stay ahead. Visit sonar.software to learn more.
All right, it's time for my favorite part of our episode, Love It or Hate It. And we're going to start with the first question is, all CPEs should have baseline configurations and firmware upgrades completed before they're stocked on the shelf. Love it or hate it?
I gotta go with love it.
Love it.
And I'm going to have a no vote on this one because I don't have any point of reference for this. But tell me more about why you both love this particular item.
I mean, you need to be providing that same customer experience every time. So you need to know what you're sending out into the field. If you have radios on random firmwares and with random configurations, you're just not going to be able to do the same install every time. It also allows your installers that opportunity that they know what they're getting. So I mean, it's not like, your expert installer, he can go into the radio and say, oh, well, this setting was wrong. But your new installer, your junior installer, he goes, this radio doesn't link. Yep, we must not have any signal from this location, and gives up a potential customer because the radio wasn't configured so that it could link to your towers. So it really helps both the installer. It speeds the installs, and it just provides that consistently and reliability you need to have.
So my only question is, firmware upgrades happen. So if you're doing it when you're stocking it on the shelf, what happens if another update comes out and you've already configured it once? Don't you have to repeat your effort?
That's a good question. And I think it kind of goes back to like how many CPEs are you stocking? And also what is on the shelf. If I have, because sometimes we would order out of necessity pallets and we would be sitting on like, 80K of CPEs. I wouldn't consider those palletized CPEs on the shelf. We would, remove and put on the shelf. So I think if the shelf life is short enough,
words matter, Rick.
Maybe it's behind one version. It's still going to connect to the tower. It's not a huge deal. But I love this because it's a huge efficiency hack. Even if your technicians do know all the ins and outs, it's just a time sink to have to do that. They can just take it, plug it in, be on the way. But it takes discipline, right? There has to be someone to do this. And again, thinking about kind of a growing or smaller ISP, you may not have a dedicated warehouse worker. So then who is doing this? Who is stocking your shelves? And then you're not, it doesn't take any, in the big picture, it's not taking any longer. Maybe it's even a little bit more efficient because you're setting up kind of assembly line style, but someone has to do it. And if it's your technicians that are helping with the warehouse work, well, now you're just creating all of this work for them to do it ahead of time. So I think this is the kind of thing that you grow into. You don't start here, but I do think that if you have someone that this could be their job, it's a huge efficiency hack.
How do you denote that it's been done? Or is it just, this is our business practice? You make sure the upgrade is done, the configurations are set, and then you put it on the shelf, and there's no mark on the box or anything like that. I don't know. So like I said, I didn't vote because I didn't have a point of reference. But did you make some sort of annotation on the packaging?
So for us, it was where it was located. So I mean, like Rick said, we might bring in a pallet worth of radios. Well, we weren't firmware upgrading and configuring a pallet worth of radios because we didn't need those all to go out. So we would do batches of them, so that we were always keeping ahead of the schedule. And there was a specific spot in the warehouse for the already reconfigured radios. There was another nowhere near it spot for the radios that had been taken down or, needed to be reconfigured, because you don't want them grabbing the wrong radios and going out with
the penalty box. That's
right.
I remember that was a real contentious thing because no one wanted to go through the penalty box. It was a pain in the butt, took time. You had to do all the diagnostics. It was basically a punishment.
We had automated a bunch of it so that, because we actually had like our customer support people, when they had time, doing the radio configs and firmware upgrades for us, because we had a script and it would really go out and test the radio when it's done to make sure that, because they'd be like, oh, did I really do that one or not? Well, it would tell them if it did or not.
Okay, great. Second question. All critical SKUs must have a backup vendor. No exceptions. Love it or hate it? I love it.
I go love it.
Oh, Larry and I match. We never match.
I know. It's so cute.
I'm
just hater.
I think this is going to be about words again, but let's find out.
All right. All critical SKUs.
No
must
exceptions.
Have
no
a backup
exceptions,
vendor. No
right?
exceptions. Tell me why you hate this.
Because of those words. I think this is, to set that as a rule that never gets broken is unrealistic. Sometimes you are ordering equipment direct from manufacturer because it is the only way to get your hands on that gear. And there's only one distribution channel. Unless I open an office in Portugal or something and then ship it over, how would I maintain this rule? I don't think it's possible.
Larry?
Yeah, I know it seemed like you and I loved it together, but I only say love it conceptually. It's not reality. Because they're so sorry.
Truth comes out.
I really, there's just things that you can't have backup vendors for. I mean, in some of my radios, if they're licensed, the license is specific to that radio. So, can you throw up a different radio that has that same frequency band available to it? Not legally. Not without changing your licensing. You're really tied into that. So, and then you may have compatibility issues. If you've got a fiber network, this vendor's ONT, well, you might think I can just go get that vendor's ONT as a backup. Might work most of the way. But I mean, compatibility is the other thing that I think makes it pretty hard.
Well, and I definitely agree with you on the conceptually, that's a best business practice. Where you can have a backup vendor for your critical SKUs, you should have a backup vendor for your critical SKUs. But you're right, no exceptions, must. Words matter here. But
It's a
I'm
little
still not
much.
going to flip my paddle for you.
That's fair. And to be clear, I agree. I think that what you can take from this is for things that are more commodities. I don't know, caulking or you talking about mounts and bolts. Yes, you should definitely, like, why wouldn't you have a backup vendor for those things? And you don't want to be caught without your commodities. So I think there's definitely a place for this, but as a blanket rule with rule with an iron fist type of approach, good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last for our love it or hate it section. Kitting may be more expensive on the purchase side, but you more than make up for it in operational efficiency.
And that's kitting.
Kitting.
Not kidding.
Kitting, not kidding. I'm not kidding.
We're not kidding.
Kitting. So kitting is, gathering together the essential components. No, kitting.
Well, then I
love it or hate it, Larry.
Wrong.
Love it or hate it. Kitting may be more expensive, but you more than make up for it in operational efficiencies. I'm going to love this.
I'm going to hate this.
Oh, man. Y'all are doubling down on me again. All right, Larry, state your case.
So I think it just really creates, this illusion of efficiency, but I think you really end up giving up so much in the kitting process. Standard installs, at least, in the wireless world, we're not really a thing. So, if I'm going to give them 50 feet of cable for this install, or I'm going to give them, 20-foot patch cable, well, half the time I can use a 6-inch patch cable or a 3-foot patch cable, or the 50 feet of cable for the outdoor stuff isn't enough, or it's 22 feet too long, so I cut it off, and now he throws 22 feet in his truck, and that eventually just gets thrown away. Yes, I'm putting it in my truck because I'm going to reuse it. Well, we cleaned out lots of trucks with all that reused cable and threw it in the dumpster because, it just eventually, you don't know how long it is. And then again, is it even worth the time to go and try and figure out, is this one long enough? Oh, well, no, I started installing with it and came up 3 feet short. Well, there's no cable stretchers, even though we convinced some of our installers to go out to the truck and get the cable stretcher.
Is that like the telecom version of like the board stretcher on the construction site?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We weren't having
Did
enough
you never
fun.
do that
No.
to your installers?
We were way too serious, apparently.
The new installer, go out and get the cable stretcher.
Well, I think the kitting is all about what you're kitting. Is it your bolts? What components are being kitted? Not necessarily the cabling, but are there other things that you can kit that will make those installations be more efficient? Your technician can grab a bag and go and complete what they're trying to do. And that's where I've heard our customers say that kitting has been an important part of their pieces. But in inventory management, if they bought these 4 different boxes of things and they're creating the kits, that's a 5th product in their inventory now, right? Because now they know that it's got 4 or 5 items in it, and they want to be able to say that value is $22.70 for this particular installation, and that's what they're using the kitting for. And it's both for financial tracking and for efficiencies for the technician. So I think it depends on what you're kitting.
I think if you're using it every time, then I could be convinced that you could kit. No, I'm not changing my opinion.
You're gonna flip?
No, I'm not.
Oh, come on,
flipping
Larry.
my opinion, but I mean, for things like if I'm always going to, for a mount, I'm going to use 12 screws. I'm going to use a 3 tar pad kits. I'm going to need mastic. Putting that all together so that I can carry that all up to the roof and I don't have to put it together in the truck. That makes sense.
So you could love it.
So I could love that to me, that when I think kitting, I think of it further beyond that, and then it didn't make sense. No, I'm not flipping. I'm trying to get you guys to flip.
You said you hate it too.
I did say I hate
Hater.
it, and I've been called worse. I think if there is a place for kitting, I think it is in contract installations. If that's how the lion's share, or in totality how your installations happen, maybe if that's the experience that I had as an operator, maybe it would be a love, because I can understand conceptually that you're going to get that consistency. And it is going to help. But in my practical experience, and it's also a little bit of a different angle. We're talking about like curating our own kits. We had to, and I couldn't remember what vendor. It's all a blur, and we're not supposed to mention any anyways. So it was, a situation where we had no choice but to purchase things in kits. And you hit the nail on the head. Our experience was obviously the stuff that we needed, it got deployed, and the stuff that was chronically underused or unused, you wouldn't believe how fast this crap piles
up
in your warehouse. And it's, you're surrounded by it. And it's hard because, like, in theory, everything has value. Like, cable has copper in it, and, like, bolts are made of metal, and it's like maybe someone wants to buy these things. Even if you are getting, pennies on the dollar scrap, but you are losing out on the time it takes to manage this stuff. Even if you're just throwing it right in the dumpster, it's costing you money. So, to me, I see the word kidding and I'm just like, yeah, that didn't work.
I think every operator has that corner in their warehouse, which is where things just go to die, and they don't actually take them out to the dumpster. It's like the little cemetery of equipment that you've ripped and replaced, but you don't really know what you want to do with it yet.
Well,
or
I'm going to use that again.
I'm going to use that again, or I'm going to sell it, or I'm going to do whatever, and then that pile gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
You know what's funny though? I was talking to Andreas, who is the founder of the ISP that I worked for, and like, you had thousands of these things at a different time, because of course you're cycling old equipment out and new equipment in. But now that, the dust is settled and we have all these, memories of the business, I wish I would have held on to at least one of every flavor of CPE and set up, like a little, museum.
Nerd alert!
And
nerd alert! Nerd alert!
That doesn't sound cool. You wouldn't buy a ticket to my
no, I would
CPE
not buy
museum?
a ticket to your museum.
Oh my God. You'd buy a ticket to my museum.
I might have some of that. I might be able to contribute parts to that museum.
But it was funny.
I do that with my computers.
Because I was lamenting about how, that's a lost opportunity. And he's like, do you know how many of those are still abandoned on roofs? So that is something that I might actually do is try and find them. I guess towers would be easier than roofs. I don't have to drive around with a ladder, but I might complete my CPE museum. I'll keep you posted.
Keep me posted. If you're listening on Spotify, tap that 5-star rating. It helps more ISPs find the show and keeps the debates going. Something tells me this what if has been a real life experience for both of you, but what if a technician, you find them to be hoarding equipment in their personal vehicle outside of your systems?
I mean, I don't know if I've had personal vehicle, but in my mind, work vehicle is almost as bad if it's outside of the system. What if this is something that's in front of me today? What do? I think that I have a very common playbook, from a manager's tactic, right? Like, clarify what the expectations are, never assume malice where, it can be whatever. Like, make sure they know how things are supposed to work, make sure they understand the expectations, define the consequences of this not being followed, and strictly enforce from there. I mean, I don't know about you guys, maybe this sounds extreme, but like, if someone is taking company equipment and doing things with it without tracking it the way that sounds a lot like theft to me, right? And frankly, in terms of
the friends and family special,
I mean, no matter, even if they're just, sloppy and you no longer know where your stuff is, like, it is akin, again, when you're the operator looking at those shelves and it's just, piles of money on the shelf. That's the same thing as piles of money. And whether it's their personal truck or their work truck, yeah, I would, maybe it sounds crazy, but to me, I would treat it like theft.
What do you think, Larry?
One, that friends and family discount. If you're asset tracking, where the friends and family discounts pop up on your network. So that becomes a little bit less of an issue. See, when I read the personal trucks, I was thinking like most of our installers had what
it was a dedicated vehicle
their
for
personal
them.
Truck, so I didn't read it as. But even there, you had hoarding issues, and the reason,
in their company assigned vehicles,
in their company assigned vehicles, you have hoarding issues. So then I think it's more of an inventory management trust issue. The reason they're doing that is because they don't want to go out on the install and not have the equipment that they need or they don't want to fill their truck in the morning and not be able to get it. So they're going to make sure that they've got enough stuff. So I think if you're having that with your work vehicles, you've got inventory management issues, and I think you need to address those. I think, one of the opportunities is to have this, let's realign our vehicles to what's supposed to be in there. Because, we all had, this is what was supposed to be in a vehicle. We all knew what was supposed to be in there. If there's, have a free day where people can return things without it having any repercussions. The other thing is, what happens to them when they go out to that install and don't have the piece of equipment? Are they really getting, hit on hard? Are they getting chewed out? So they're like, I can't have that happen to me again. I'm gonna, So you can't have that happening all the time, because that's the issue. We talked about multiple truck rolls, blah blah blah.
What's the generalized best business practice for days worth of install equipment you would want in a vehicle? I'm sorry, I'm just throwing this out willy-nilly, but
so for us, the non-asset managed inventory, there was, regular stock, and you restock that. And we actually left time at the end of the week where you went out to your truck, looked at what you got, and restocked it and got it ready for the next week. The asset stuff was set out. We knew what they were going to do for installs, so they had, the right number of radio, and you had, more routers and things like that, because you never knew if a customer was going to buy a router or wanted a couple of them because their house was so huge.
I'm always looking for that upsell opportunity, Larry. Always looking for the upsell.
So for us, it was more of like an X plus Y type of approach, where X was the baseline that you should have in the vehicles. And I'm thinking not everyone operates in the same way, but like we would mix our our service calls and our installations. We're really trying to book based on geography efficiency, right?
100%.
Yeah. So you don't really know how many you got to have more than you think you need, but we would define what that would be. And then the Y is the variable, and that is based on what we know about the day. So if you have 5 installs, well, obviously, you're going to need 5 of those, and what flavor of CPE probably. So, X plus Y would make it up. And that's why, for those serialized things, it would be a daily, usually a morning restock before you roll out. But yeah, for the more commodity, consumables type stuff, you would make sure you kind of have what you need for a few days. And it's a little bit looser, I think, because it's lower dollar value on that stuff.
The X plus Y is what we did too, because we did the same thing. You'd schedule X number of installs. If those went really well, you could do service calls, especially if you're in that area. And we did do, the GPS tracking.
Or you could equipment recovery or
right. Any of that stuff. Well, you don't need extra inventory in the truck to do equipment recovery, but
right. But it's the efficiencies of what your day is.
You definitely want to have that extra in there so you can manage the day properly without having to come back to get some stuff to go back out.
I just know certain of our customers are struggling currently with entire vehicles being stolen. Not just gear falling off the back of the trucks, but the trucks themselves being stolen.
We've never had that. We did have like trailers broken into and copper being stolen from sites.
Tower sites.
Oh my gosh.
Stripped. We actually started putting most of our copper. We started putting most of it in the building.
Yeah.
Because it was just getting stripped otherwise.
All right. Thanks so much, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Next time on Bandwidth, we're tackling the mistakes that make or break ISP marketing. From generic messaging that sounds just like the competition to sales teams chasing leads instead of building trust, this episode breaks down what's really holding providers back from growth. If you want your brand to stand out and actually convert, don't miss it.
Remember, when you connect communities, you unlock what's possible. Until next time.